So
Yeah.
IWA, AWA versus the WWF. This is the thesis that I started with, and through my research, I found that it was very difficult for the IWA and AWA to compete, but they did have a working agreement that I learned about as a teenager, just listening to my mentor's stories, because he was working for Hiro Matsuda, and Vince Sr. actually offered him a contract. And my trainer said the money wasn't enough. Vince Sr. was interested in him and Andre the Giant, Andre Rosenwald at the time, but my trainer declined and stuck with IWA, AWA. So I got really interested in IWA. So with the 1960s coming to a close, the 1970s were approaching, and professional wrestling was emerging in competitive international markets, pointing to a sport which found itself different in different cultural landscapes and promotions, which were growing and working together to create global competition to maximize profits. You can see the sprout of, I guess, pro wrestling, the idea of a business and its growth. A global market was emerging, and wrestling, and with the robust health of the territories intact. One Vince Sr. ran the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. While many think he had no competition, I argue otherwise. Wrestling does hurt. Competition did exist, and it's often the marketing that might be fake. Okay, so key global players. Thanks to the television system becoming more affordable at home, wrestling was now available within one's own living room. No longer did people have to visit bars or sports stadiums to see taped pro wrestling. So I was told that closed circuit television was actually a lot more affordable back then. So people would go out to public spaces and watch wrestling on closed circuit or live as it happened. In the case of ticket buying spectators, it was now available to mass consumers, and the draw of the ticket still held a lot of value. But the culture of the spectacle and spectator sport, which is professional wrestling, was now available to those at home within the domestic sphere, ushering a time where professional wrestling became pure entertainment for those to enjoy at home and also to talk about in the public. This presentation will not only look at the dynamic history and cultural sociological factors at play, but also the in-ring performers who contributed to professional wrestling as pioneers of the sport and propelled it forward, along with the promoters who made deals shaking hands with people in business. While the WWE Hall of Fame exists in order to pay social tribute to those who helped pioneer the sport, maybe more importantly, give acknowledgement to the pro wrestlers who essentially created the WWE with their work. Many wrestlers whose work was just as important may have been excluded due to the fact that their contributions were outside the context of working for the WWE. And this actually came up. So I'm good friends with WWE producer TJ Wilson as well. Yeah, I think I mentioned it. But I chat with him through Instagram almost every day, and I keep on asking why Tiger Jeet Singh is not yet in the Hall of Fame. And his answer is that Tiger Jeet Singh didn't wrestle in WWF all that much. So, but I still think he should be, because he's definitely a pioneer of the sport, and yeah, propelled it in Japan. So, as an international wrestler. Okay, television and its impact and global reach. It is thus the use of propaganda, or marketing rather, which makes one's in-ring work overshadow others. Despite crowd attendance, draws of pure talent, it does take quite a while for wrestlers to become superstars, and promoting is certainly a key component and huge factor in determining who the most popular wrestlers are. Saturday Night Wrestling telecast was on the Dumont Telecast network, which I've learned is historically prominent in terms of being a television network, because I guess around the 1950s, that was a big boom in television, and the technology was now accessible and new, and there it was. So the Dumont Network was a big deal network, although somewhat forgotten about, played a pivotal role in shaping telecast pro wrestling during the 1950s. Pro wrestling became more casual, not just attracting those who wanted to see a sort of horse race to bet on their favorite wrestlers and to cheer on, but rather also a spectacle which could be enjoyed by families on the weekend. So, catch wrestling and Olympic wrestling's role in manifesting professional wrestling. I also talked to Jake Shannon. He talks about British wrestling a lot, and then he ties it in with Japanese MMA. But I find he doesn't talk about the French and their influence on professional wrestling through Kachkan wrestling, which I found through my research to be really fascinating. So during the early 19, I wrote 1990s. That's actually a typo. It's 1900, 1900. So French Olympians were already using catch wrestling to simulate professional wrestling matches during exhibition bouts. So they'd have a ring, they'd start grappling, and a crowd would come around. And I'm not sure if they would sell tickets or not, but the sport was starting to emerge. But it also became popular in England around the same time, and Billy Riley, who was a legit wrestler, started training other wrestlers like Billy Robinson. The National Wrestling Alliance would later emerge in America as an entity which would oversee various territorial promotions using an emblem to signify an official body or group of athletes of professional standards in wrestling who were the top of their class. So they were marketing this emblem and using that emblem, saying that, oh, if you have this signature stamp of ours, then you're number one. You can be in this circular group. Or I don't know. For me, as a wrestler, I guess kayfabe, it's not really much about keeping secrets, but it's about circles, that like social circles. So all the wrestlers are in one circle, and there's one promoter told me back in the day they would draw a chalk line, and my trainer told me that the wrestlers will also use a carny talk. So they'd start talking kind of like gibberish if the fans came around. So the chalk line separated the fans from the wrestlers backstage. And even these days when I wrestle on independent shows, like no fans are allowed backstage, just the referees. And even my friend who drives me is not allowed backstage to come say, oh, it's time to go. Just the referees and the wrestlers. And the booker will come back sometimes. Andre the Giant. Andre made his debut as an actor in 1967, which alludes to the notion of pro wrestling as celebrity or actor. On May 18, 1969, Andre teamed with Ivan Strogoff against two Japanese wrestlers, Taiyan Waru and Strong Kobayashi. Andre began drinking a bit more, 10 beers or so. The documentary that I was watching and the research that I found through the 8th Wonder of the World books today, he enjoyed drinking beer with a Japanese promoter that he met. I'm not sure if it was Hiro Matsuda or another promoter who looked for IWE backstage, but he was actually a really good drinking friend of my mentor. And my mentor got sick eventually from drinking with Andre too much, so he ended up leaving Japan after 3 years. He thoroughly enjoyed their tours and liked President Yoshihara of IWE Japan. That's who it was. The promotion offered other superstars for Andre to work with. Championships, a steel cage, which was not really talked about at the time, tours and tournaments. Andre pro-wrestled in the IWA World Series in the finals against Billy Robinson and Carl Gotch. And you had this like immense tournament with all these superstars from around the world. It's unheard of at the time. Like some of these guys are legit catch can. Well, yeah, they are legit catch can wrestlers. Even Andre was learning that in France before he turned pro. And yeah, these guys could shoot wrestle with each other in the ring if they needed to. They could use folk style. It kind of reminded me of the UFC, but the outcome is predetermined because there was a booker and there was a lot of money on the line. And yeah, probably more than makers make the equivalent of the times, I guess. Yeah. The sort of comparative nature of the time. So it was a tournament style system which included many international recognized superstars. So International Wrestling Enterprise again. IW is founded by Hiro Matsuda, who is seen as a real martial artist and one hell of a pro wrestler. So again, you have this merging with like judo, karate. My trainer was also training karate when he went to Japan, and when he went to the stadiums, he also got to go to sumo events where the emperor would be by invite only. So he was a big deal in Japan, and his monikers were Taro Kurishio and Big, because when he debuted, he was one of the biggest black wrestlers in Japan at the time. If not, yeah, I don't know how many. I don't know how many big wrestlers. I'm not sure. Bobo Brazil is also very big, but Tony Atlas was in America, so I'm not sure. The Rock's father was also in Japan at the time, and he wrestled with my trainer. They were supposed to wrestle as a tag team, but that did not occur. But apparently they were friends backstage and stuff. They knew each other. So IWB booked real judo stars who knew how to pro wrestle along with international talent who they brought to Japan, and also had one compete on international tours and tournaments. Their approach to pro wrestling can be seen as a purist approach instead of mere entertainment value. This way of promoting prompted a legacy and legitimacy that often makes people argue that pro wrestling is real and hurts compared to onlookers who are in disbelief of the realness of the sport, claiming that wrestlers follow a script like actors on the stage. In reality, much the wrestling other than finishes or real spots, or in a general narrative, are constructed by the booker and promoter, leaving the wrestlers to do their work and call the match backstage or even in the ring, which pro wrestlers call on the fly. I don't think this happens all the time. This might happen sometimes in the WWE, but I guess due to the fact that there's so much money on the line, they want everything to be pre-planned and go so and so based on people backstage that they determine. But on the independents, often the case, the booker tells us to finish. The promoter is overwatching the entire show, putting everything together, has a million things to do. So it's left to the wrestlers to go backstage, act like professionals, know that we're going to hurt each other. Sometimes we beat each other up. And again, we get away with it because that's the nature of pro wrestling. Because people think it's all fake these days. So if we hurt each other, then they might think it's still fake or that it's a botch. I took on a CFL player and he powerbombed me twice and I got a concussion. And my friend said, who was a fan who was doing fan cam at the time, said that looked watched, but it was a jackknife powerbomb. So, and he was a CFL player who weighed 275 pounds, and I'm a cruiserweight. Okay, Vern Gagne. The co-promoter of American Wrestling Association, Vern Gagne, holds a place within the WWE Hall of Fame, being recognized as an outstanding NCAA wrestler and an even better professional wrestler and a world-class promoter who took a leap of cultural faith and invested in a relationship with Japan's hottest promotion, International Wrestling Enterprise, which predated both All Japan Pro Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling in existence, and which helped set a long-lasting foundation in Japan of being legitimate. The Japanese pro wrestling being known as being harder, or rather, a lot of people call it stiffer. That was so stiff, or its strong style is stiffer, as they say, or that they hit harder. It's actually not. It's their moves, and we tend to hit with like the meaty parts of our arms and stuff. Not really like Muay Thai. They use the bone. It's bone to skull, or 6 points of combat. They call it the style. So that's really the difference between Muay Thai and pro wrestling. We tend to hit more with our muscles than bone. That causes less injury, so we can perform more dates and get more money. Because pro wrestlers are business people. He worked alongside Vern. So he was essentially a really wholesome type of person. That was a gimmick, but I argue that most gimmicks, if they really need to work, or if you really want them to work, then they should fit the personality of the person who needs to make them work in the first place. The carnivalesque nature of pro wrestling existed as crowds formed around the ring. Tickets were sold to enjoy the spectator sport, but wholesome baby faces helped signify that, I guess, when clashing against, sorry, I had a typo though. Signify that when clashing against evil heel wrestlers. American Wrestling Association, promoted by Larry Carbo and Vern Gagne in Minneapolis. So the focus, this is from the WWE Hall of Fame website. So the AWA's first big holiday show in Minnesota's Metropolitan Stadium was main evented by 2 out of 3 falls, showdown between Gagne and Dick the Bruiser. From the Green Bay Packer, the cigar-chomping Bruiser is a dirty fighter, but the agile Gagne manages to outwit his foe to hang on to the title. In the years to come, Dick the Bruiser becomes one of the AWA's most recognizable faces. That's from WWE.com. Bobby Heenan. I used to hear stories about Bobby Heenan, and he's just known as he's known as a WCW, AWA guy. But in Japan, and I wasn't able to find anything, but my trainer was telling me stories that Bobby Heenan was training with Carl Gotch and Billy Robinson in Japan and Blackjack Mulligan, which is to me is pretty outlandish, but I believe my mentors. So, and he was AWA and IWB were doing international tours together, kind of going from they were AWA sent Billy Graham and allowed Andre to finish there and etc. So Heenan was doing his squats like anybody else, paying his dues, and apparently he was a big ribber. So his ribs, like I heard that he went to a Japanese press conference without any pants on, and all the ladies and like in the crowd like was gawking at him, and the Japanese journalists were shocked. And then and then apparently he left. So I don't know. Maybe there's no data because of his ribs were so bad for the time.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I got a friend, I've heard Bobby Heenan stories too.
Oh, okay.
And he definitely, I think is going as a ribber.
Yeah.
I want to be cognizant of time, and we still have 2 more presentations. Do you want to go to your last slide or sum it up really quickly so we can make sure to get in our last 2?
I just want to go to my trainer, I guess. Yeah, I had more slides. Maybe I made it too long. Yeah, so this was my trainer, Ted Herbert, of IWB Japan. Yeah, he defeated Larry the Axe Hennig and for a world championship. I'm still trying to indicate which one it was because he told me he held the IWA world title, which was I guess one of the first world titles, and that was the IWE's championships. So some of the data, like you could see on like Wikipedia, it says vacant, but it doesn't show. Like, it shows that Billy Robinson won it afterwards, but they might be missing some of the data on Wikipedia at the time because none of Ted Herbert's matches are actually available. Only his debut, which is on YouTube, I found only 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm still working on finding more research, but I've been at it for a while. So sometimes I exhaust my sources and then I eventually come back to it. Yeah. And some of my matches are on YouTube if you want to. Yeah, I had a chat with Fumi Sato, interview with him.
That's so cool.
Yeah, Fumi's a good friend. This is the last slide was one of my matches. It was against Louis.
Oh, if you want to send us this, I definitely want to be able to
make that would be awesome. Yeah,
put it on the site and everything. Yeah, at least in the video.
Okay, I got to work alongside Cody Deaner as well. Yeah, won that match with the top rope splash and stuff. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, I want to thank you for this opportunity. It was really cool.
Yes. No, absolutely. Yeah, you're stuck with us now. Thanks.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, this is dope. Much appreciated.
Thanks everybody for being here. My name is Franny Howes. I am a full professor and department chair at the Oregon Institute of Technology, and now that I'm a full professor, I can write about whatever I want, and what I want to write about is Yoshihiko. So my presentation is titled Yoshihiko is Bleeding, the People's Battle Doll and Meaning Making in Wrestling. So who is Yoshihiko? Yoshihiko is a wrestler for the Japanese promotion DDT, a member of the roster since 2005, the current tag team partner of Mao, a human, and holder of the Banger Zone Wrestling Tag Team Championship since February of 2024, with at least 5 defenses. Yoshihiko is big in France. Banger Zone is Belgian wrestling, if you want to get into international promotions. Yoshihiko's had the DDT Ironman Heavy Metalweight Championship about at least 22 times, and this title was created as a parody of the hardcore title in WWE. It has a 24/7 defense rule, but instead of retiring it when the hardcore title was retired, they've continued to defend it, and it's changed hands, I think, about 1,800 times. Most recently, Yoshihiko had a storyline feud with Minoru Suzuki. about his deep disrespect that he did not want to have a match against Yoshihiko, which reached a culmination at their WrestleMania week show in Vegas. Yoshihiko is at least materially real and human shaped. I would also say, in the words of my community, Yoshihiko is very gender. Created originally as a male character, the brother of Yoshihiro Sakai, who was also Muscle Sakai and now wrestles as Super Sassen Dango Machine, a parody of Super Strong Machine, and has parodied over-the-top wrestling masculinity at various times. But depending on who's talking, he, it, or she pronouns, it varies quite a bit. And for some reason, when I began this research, I found fan sources describing Yoshihiko as Dutch, and in fact had the nickname the Dutch Badass. I did figure out why eventually. I also can't see I see chat is happening while I'm screen sharing, but I can't see your questions. I will go back and see them.
Mostly me going, yes.
And this is Yoshihiko. This is Yoshihiko entering the ring and in his corner for his match against Minoru Suzuki. And I took all the photos in this presentation. So you will see Yoshihiko. What is Yoshihiko? A wrestling character, I would say, portrayed by a series of inflatable and or stuffed sex dolls. People describe him as a blow-up doll, but that hasn't been true for a really long time. And I found out through Bo Ruberg's book, Sex Dolls at Sea, there's a term for a low-quality stuffed sex doll that's something like a body pillow, kind of like I think it's called a dakinamura. That's called a Dutch wife. In Japanese, it's Dutch waifu. So I was very surprised to find out Yoshihiko is a waifu. But that is half of why Yoshihiko is sometimes called the Dutch Badass in Japanese. The other half is that Yoshihiko used to have a parody of Undertaker's biker taker gimmick. So the American Badass, the Dutch Badass. And thus, Yoshihiko is an example of the notorious broom that any good wrestler should be able to have a match against, as goes either the quote from The Undertaker that Shawn Michaels could have a match against a broom, or just this idea that, well, of course, anybody should be able to do that. In matches, in narrative, at present, most of Yoshihiko's matches structure him as a fairly conventional fan favorite underdog. He is constantly underestimated, he gets violently beat up, and then, surprisingly, kicks out. And then often is severely injured, fights through that to a dramatic finish. Sometimes he loses, sometimes he wins. But these narrative structures are very familiar. I would venture Yoshihiko is also a technology for both satirizing and exemplifying the over-the-top extremes of wrestling, and in fact, making fun a little bit of fans' desire for violence. And as you can probably tell, one of my special interests. I am fascinated by edge cases, the exceptions that prove the rule, and non-human wrestlers are an example of that. So here's some more photos of Yoshihiko flying back into the ring after getting knocked out. So another important thing to understand the context for a gimmick like this is, where is Yoshihiko? And the answer originally is DDT. This is a Japanese promotion that's currently owned by Cyberfights, is in a group with Pro Wrestling Noah and Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling. They describe themselves as Lucha Resu, that they are putting on a combination of Lucha Libre and Puro Resu that has a stronger emphasis and frequency on comedy wrestling than most other promotions. They also frequently feature what I would describe as gay slapstick and naughty or sexual humor, along with more serious matches and storylines. So if you have a hard time imagining Minoru Suzuki being in like the gay comedy wrestling promotion, it's been interesting. They, as I mentioned with their Ironman heavy metalweight championship, they have a history of parodying things going on in other top tier promotions and then taking it to the extreme and just never giving up the joke. I want to give them credit for innovative, campy comedy wrestling. I think they are they've introduced a variety of unusual gimmicks that I think push the boundaries of what's possible with the art form. And I think it's also interesting to note, at least at present, they have a very heavily female audience. It's very clear from watching who's in the audience at their shows that a lot of this is unfolding for the female gaze. So here's the meme I said I was going to add based on the other presentation. So this is from Tumblr user Dilf in Peril, and it is a bell curve of the wrestling understander score. The person who doesn't understand says, "Oh my God, this is so gay." The person who's in the middle of the bell curve is like, "Well, actually, that's just a normal submission." And he's painting him like that to make it harder to kick out. He's actually not sniffing his pits, he's calling the match. And then on the far right end of the bell curve that this Tumblr user is venturing are like the true understanders. Yay. So I've highlighted a part of this bell curve where I think DDT typically lies. Yoshihiko is adjacent to all of that stuff. And I think certainly doing some very queer things with gender. So there are some challenges trying to even research factual, basic information about this character and this gimmick. He does give interviews, but is portrayed as refusing to answer questions because he can't talk. But those interviews are out there. He doesn't have an entry on cagematch.net because the website ontologically does not acknowledge that he is a real wrestler. Other websites that are less thorough do acknowledge him. There's only one scholarly source that mentions him, and the authors don't even agree whether he's animate. My Japanese also is poor. I am doing my best. And Yoshihiko didn't have an English language Wikipedia page until I made one this year, and became America's #1 Yoshihiko scholar by virtue of being America's only Yoshihiko scholar. So while trying to even research basic information to write that page, I found a bunch of things that have never been documented before that I couldn't put in the Wikipedia article because you can't put original research in a Wikipedia article. And thus, I decided that this would be a good venue to present that research. So there are two eras of Yoshihiko's career, and most coverage of Yoshihiko focuses on the older matches around the time of like the notorious Golden Lovers match. So the early period, Yoshihiko was pretty visibly an inflatable doll, and that's the era where he went through several gimmicks parodying over-the-top male wrestlers like The Undertaker, The Great Muta, and Hulk Hogan. There's a great bit where he dies mid-match and then gets to make a second entrance that's a parody of Biker Taker's like motorcycle entrance, except Yoshihiko is on a tricycle. Peak. And in these cases, the technology is operating because Yoshihiko is being moved by the opponents and the match seconds. So the people around the ring who also have a job of getting the audience out of the way for a crowd dive, also help move Yoshihiko around. The later period, that's sometime before 2023 to the present, Yoshihiko is a stuffed doll. I'm gonna venture. I haven't poked the doll, but you can clearly see that it's not floating around like a balloon anymore. And at this point, Yoshihiko is developed more as an original character. He's had international appearances, and there is the appearance of an unacknowledged black-clad figure that I've seen referred to as Yoshihiko's mysterious shadow. And this figure, who you might have seen in the pictures I've shown, is also responsible for manipulating the doll and creating parts of the match. So this was one of my big realizations that I couldn't put in my Wikipedia article, is that Yoshihiko's actually using Japanese theater and puppetry techniques to make these matches happen. So it first reminded me of bunraku, which is a form of Japanese puppetry that involves fully black-clad puppeteers, unlike something like the Muppets, where the puppeteer is underneath and has their hand up here. The puppeteers are just completely clad in black and fully visible, manipulating a puppet without strings or hand puppet. It's sort of just like a doll. And so Yoshihiko operates very much like a bunraku puppet, is being moved at present by a black-clad puppeteer in the same way. And in kabuki theater, there's a figure called a karoku, who is a stagehand dressed fully in black, including a black mask, and who's treated as if completely invisible. And in kabuki, sometimes the karoku is that the audience has been assuming they're not supposed to notice because the figure's in black, is actually revealed to be a ninja and stabs a character on stage. I am very confident in saying that Yoshihiko's shadow is operating like a karoku. Not only is the figure completely clad in black, more or less not supposed to be noticed, but every once in a while, the shadow does attack someone. So, for instance, one of Yoshihiko and Mao's tag team title defenses in BZW involved a surprise moonsault off of the turnbuckle by the mysterious black-clad figure, interrupting the match. I will note the Shadow's identity is not public information, which seems to be operating like other masked characters in wrestling, except at least those characters are acknowledged as being there. So here's a couple of pictures highlighting the mysterious shadow or the Kuroku. So this figure carries Yoshihiko in and puppeteers him to matches during the entrances. And so on the left is Mao, Yoshihiko, and the Kuroku getting ready for their BZW tag team defense. On the right is an unusual scene of the Kuroku being unable to reach Yoshihiko to interfere in the match and expressing distress, which I was excited to get a picture of. In these matches, everyone has to participate in maintaining the fiction. The opponents have to sell either a win or a loss. And I will note, super kicks, receiving a super kick by Yoshihiko sounds exactly the same as getting super kicked by anyone else, because the wrestlers are slapping their thighs in the same way, which is kind of a startling reminder of the artificiality of the human versus human matches we're more used to. The referees participate, the commentators have to participate, and the fans participate. I think this is really in line with the previous presentation about fans being semi-fictional characters, because if the fans don't buy it, it would fall flat. But the 4 Yoshihiko matches I got to observe in person, as well as the media I've consumed in recording, Yoshihiko's pretty over. That in fact, it seems like the majority of fans are excited to participate in this fiction. In the 4 matches I observed, I only noted one fan loudly disbelieving the illusion. One guy at BZW, and he was drowned out by the rest of the crowd. And this is the same for any other wrestler. If these parts of the match don't work for a human wrestler, the fiction would fall apart. And it's maybe less different than you would think for Yoshihiko. Here's just a couple more pictures of Suzuki versus Yoshihiko. Yoshihiko getting his head slammed into the ring post and receiving a very dramatic big boot in the corner. So I would venture you could also call Yoshihiko a technology, a relatively consistent tool for solving a problem. And maybe that problem is human wrestlers are fragile. So some of the technological affordances of Yoshihiko include he can't die, but he can be destroyed for dramatic effect. So in the early era, Yoshihiko's head was popped in a match with Antonio Honda, which honestly I think is pretty disturbing. He can't really be injured, but in fact, he can only acquire worked injuries for dramatic effect. So, for instance, his torso burst open to spill stuffing and kayfabe organs, and he also got shot with a gun in Yoshihiko and Don Shokudino versus the Golden Lovers from 2009, which is probably Yoshihiko's most famous match. So I would say this Yoshihiko fulfills audiences' desire for violence, and they're reveling in over the top violence while poking fun at it. That is this what you want? Is this it? And so here's a couple examples of Yoshihiko regularly being flung into the audience in ways that would be seriously damaging for a human wrestler. In fact, Yoshihiko on the left was flung into my own seat. You can see the sign sitting on the chair. That was my seat. And Yoshihiko donning the crimson mask. Yoshihiko is in fact bleeding. I named this paper Yoshihiko is bleeding before I knew I would see it. So during the Suzuki match, Yoshihiko was kicked out of the ring, and while out non-visible, did the doll equivalent of blading, and slowly the puppeteer clawed Yoshihiko back up into the ring, and the cameras were able to catch the blood, which was pretty dramatic at the time. This is maybe less important of a piece of the technology, but it's also not documented anywhere. Yoshihiko's wrists are Velcro. They can be attached to each other so the doll can maintain holds. If you want his legs to be attached together, it seems like people typically tie them into a knot. FYI. And in this shot, you can see Yoshihiko's wrists are Velcroed together to maintain a hold on Suzuki in exactly that way. And the blood is seeping into the doll all over the place. So let me talk about Yoshihiko as a broom in an affectionate way. I find that the expression, a good wrestler should be able to have a good match against a broom, is kind of like the saying, my kid could do that, or I could do that about contemporary art. I would say, okay, so go out there and do it. I think these are very interesting creative matches, and I'm excited to see them. It would be weird if every match was like this, but I think they have merits. I would also say not all broom matches are alike. Yoshihiko works somewhat differently from other non-human wrestlers, like the Invisible Man, in line with Japanese theatrical techniques. And I think DDT deserves some credit for that innovation. In agreement with Hubert Vihilla's 2022 essay comparing non-human wrestlers. And these non-human gimmicks can grow and change over time. So, in conclusion, who needs actor network theory or thing theory when you have kayfabe? These are a couple of examples of academics going to great lengths theoretically to justify considering an inanimate object as having agency or imagining it as if it were animate to take its perspective. And from a wrestling perspective, my thought is why would I adopt that perspective? Within wrestling, our consensual reality can easily take that position on. I would say kayfabe is a durable enough rhetorical fantasy to hold up even air. Thank you. These are my references, and just in case you're curious, I did get Mao and Yoshihiko's autographs.
Yes, but did you poke it?
I did get a fist bump.
Okay. Because we were just discussing how awesome of a paper title that would be. It's like, I didn't get to poke. Well, what was it? I'm scrolling up.
I didn't get to poke the doll.
I haven't poked the doll. Yeah, that would be a great paper title. And I was like, ... yet. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is awesome. We've just been in the chat, just loving all of this. And everything, like David's saying, is just coming together, like all of the connections, because there were points about bringing back Adam's talk about the audience connection and how that engagement kind of plays into this. And I just thought that was such a great point, about the everybody taking place and co-creating the fantasy, and extending that for a very long period of time. That was Melinda's comment. I don't know if you have another one to extend on that, Melinda, or if you want to respond quick, Franny.
No, I loved Adam's talk. I really was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what's happening here. If the audience isn't on board, it's definitely going to fall flat. But I got to see 4 where the audience was completely on board.
Where was it again?
So BZW had their first show in the United States, Thursday of WrestleMania week, at Swan Dive. And then DDT had their own show. There was a DDT versus TJPW versus GCW. And then there was the GCW Clusterfuck Battle Royal. I think last year Yoshihiko was in the final 3 of that, but was entered early and was eliminated fairly early. But it was definitely a clusterfuck.
Right on. I'm so mad because I live in Vegas and I didn't get to really attend anything. So just a couple of parties, but I was like, nah. But no, this is awesome. We had one more presentation lined up from Jonathan Ford, but I don't think he's here, and nor have I seen him. So you might have just, closed us all the way out. Are there any other comments or questions from the audience before 6:30 a.m.? Ooh, Lord. Why? Damn, you're committed. Ugh. You're a friend of his. Well, Jonathan, you're talking about, Mark? Yeah, well, tell him sleeping is overrated. Oh, yes, Carolyn, what you got in here? What are you sending people? Let me click to download. What is this? Oh, ooh, wrestlers, fans, and power dynamics at live events. Annette Hill. What year is this? 2019.
That's like from a couple of years ago. The book that Chris and I edited, and in it is also my chapter on the co-constructive nature of kayfabe. And so I want to make sure people have it.
Thank
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Mark, yes, give Jonathan shit for us. Otherwise, you guys have been absolutely phenomenal. And AC, yes, please, plug all the things. That's what this is for, supporting each other. So AC, I know you wanted to say something with your sick voice.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your understanding. Look, last year I completed a dissertation at Saarland University in Germany, which the title of it is Getting Over the History, Industry, Performance Art, and Cultural Impact of American Professional Wrestling. And it's pretty broad. It covers a lot of the topics that came up today. Everything from kabuki theater to the origins of pro wrestling as an Olympic sport, as well as performance theory and a whole litany of other stuff. It is to the great pain of my former advisor, 730 pages long. And it is available for exactly free. And I thought before I have to put a commercial edition of it out here in the US, I'll post it for everybody here to enjoy and use. And please pirate, just throw in a citation, even if a winking one, because that'll make me feel like those 4 years of research was worth it. So there, I put in the chat a link to the abstract, and a second link to the thing itself. It's 4 extremely long chapters. Chapter 1, wrestling as theater, including some stuff about the performativity of Americanness in and of itself. Chapter 2 is the craft of the work, that gets into the structuring of matches and storyline in 3, 7, and 9 act structures. Then Chapter 3 is the presence of professional wrestling in American pop culture and sports culture. And Chapter 4 is an analysis of all that other stuff. And Chapter 5 is a really detailed, in-depth subcultural history of American pro wrestling over the past 150 years. So please feel free to cannibalize this thing to your heart's content and enjoy if you want to.